This is a small wetland here at Epping. This was actually created out of some old tennis courts that had been left here when this place was an old country club. Now, a wetland is basically what its name says. It's land that is wet. It's kind of a transition between land and water. Wetlands are typically very shallow places, like this one is. And to have a real wetland, you have to have more than just water. You've got to have water-loving plants, also called hydrophytic plants. And one of them is right here, and that's cattails. You can see last year's cattails in the back with the brown fluffy things on top. Each piece of fluff has a tiny seed on the end. And then here in front you see the new green cattails coming up. Looks like right here we have a kind of sedge, which is another wetland plant. We have some creeping water primrose just starting to come up out there in the water. And let's see, it looks like we have some rushes here along the side. And then all over the surface we have all kinds of algae that are covering the surface right now. So in addition to hydrophytic plants, you've also got to have hydric soils. So if we were to dig down into the bottom of the wetland and then put the soils through some tests, we would determine that these are hydric soils, and that basically means these are soils that contain very little oxygen, and the plants which grow here have to be adapted to those soils. Here's another plant that I didn't point out. This is our black willow, which grows up a little bit higher, but their roots really like water, or to be near water. This is a favorite plant of beavers for food and building, and lots of other animals too. Now, this is kind of a quiet time of day for birds, but if we were here early in the morning or a little bit later in the day, we'd see lots of red-winged blackbirds who are building their nests down in the cattails. That sound you just heard is a cricket frog. They are breeding in here. And I bet that if we looked, we would find tadpoles, or at least some eggs. So they make that sound that kind of sounds like clicking pebbles together. Let's get down a little closer. So here is another nice little wetland that I like out here at Epping. Walk up to it. This one is a little shallower, a little less covered with algae than the first one. And it's kind of nice to look around and compare the two. Have more, little shallower, as I said, more emergent plants, or ones that stick up above the water. There's our willow tree, a small one, and more cattails in the background. We have spike rush, which is that spiky looking plant right here, I think. And then down in the water, looks like we have some smartweed coming up. I'm not sure if that's pickerel weed or arrowhead, one of the many water plants, and then probably some creeping water primrose in there as well. And let's see. And it's a pretty little place, surrounded by willow trees. I would classify this as a small marsh if we were trying to determine what type of wetland. There are many kinds, including bogs, salt marshes. A swamp is dominated by woody vegetation. So if we came back in a few years and this was full of willow trees or cypress trees, then we would call it a swamp instead of a marsh, most likely. And then I can't remember them all. Let's see what we can see just looking down in the water. See if we see anything. I can see a water boatman on top of the water. A thing that looks like it has oars on the side. There's another one over there. Looks like a tadpole. This is an excellent place for frogs to lay their eggs. So yes, lots of tadpoles are in here. And I will get my net and see if we can find a few little creatures to show you today. Once again, we have our bucket with some water in it and the things I've dumped into it on this net. Let's spread them out. Okay, we have kind of a nice mix of creatures here in this pan. Let's see if I can make sure it's in focus. So let's see, we have a lot of tadpoles. Get some plants out. This little plant is Eastern Water Primrose. It has a yellow flower later on. Some more algae. Look, here's a tiny little crayfish. Baby crawdad. Here's a water boatman, which is a nice water bug. Looks like it has oars on the side. That one's upside down. I wanted to show you this little invertebrate. This is we call it a bloodworm, but what it is the larva of a type of fly. Now, it's not the house fly that you're used to seeing around your house. Flies are actually a huge, huge group of insects. And this one will eventually grow up and become a fly. The reason I wanted to point it out is that when you see a lot of these can be an indicator of poor water quality, simply because fly larvae tend to be able to handle some really terrible water quality conditions. So if you do a sample and all you find are fly larvae, that's a kind of an indicator that maybe things aren't great in that habitat. But in this case, this is just one of many species that are living in this little tiny wetland, including frogs. We've got pond snails. Pond snails are another really tolerant species, or tolerant group of animals. There are a lot of different species. Let's see if I can get a pond snail up here. I'm doing it left-handed. There we go. There's another little snail. And I wish that I had some students here with me, because it's much more fun for students to be able to find these things on their own. Here's another little invertebrate that looks like a beetle larva, like a baby beetle. So we've had a pretty good mix of creatures to observe today. This is something you can do on your own, although you have to be very careful around wetlands. And I love getting out with students and being able to take a few more risks than I would let students take, and then let them discover these really interesting creatures that live out in the water. And just so you know, I will return everybody to the place where they came from so they can continue living their lives. Okay?